The brother of the Manchester bomber has reportedly declared himself an Islamic emir in a British prison and attacked a guard in what was described as an animalistic attack. Well, the assault by 3 convicted terrorists inside one of Britain's most secure jails has been described as a wake-up call for the government. Hashem Abedi, along with Parsons Green bomber Acheson and fellow ISIS-supporting terror offender Mohammed Saeed, attacked custodian manager Paul Edwards in his office at HMP Belmarsh's high-security unit. This was last year. It's one of several recent cases that have exposed Islamist terror networks actually inside Belmarsh prison. Well, joining me, Ian Acheson, a former prison governor and senior advisor to the Counter Extremism Project. A very warm welcome to you. Were you surprised to hear of this event at Belmarsh?
Well, I'm afraid I wasn't surprised at all, Colin, and good afternoon to you, and thanks for having me on. Can I just say, first of all, that I wish Mr. Edwards, who was the custodial manager that you referred to, and his colleagues who suffered this ferocious attack, a speedy recovery. They do a job many of us couldn't and wouldn't do, precisely for the reasons that you've mentioned. That these are men and women that get up in the morning and leave their families, put on a uniform, and are in very close proximity to some of the most dangerous people in Western Europe. And I'm afraid I wasn't surprised by this attack. There have been several in the past and subsequently that have illustrated an inability of the prison service to manage particularly dangerous, ideologically motivated offenders. This incident that happened in May of 2020 came only months after an attack on a prison officer in HMP Whitemoor by a terrorist and somebody he'd radicalised, wearing fake suicide belts and armed with improvised weapons that came within seconds of murdering a prison officer. Now, if you think about the environment that prison staff work in and the fact that you've got terrorist prisoners inside units like the high security unit in Belmarsh, similar types of environments that have been serving or are serving extremely long sentences with very little to lose. Yeah. You see the vulnerability of prison staff, and unfortunately you see these security failures happening more and more often, where these staff are made vulnerable to, attacks that Mr. Edwards himself described as animalistic and said, he felt very lucky to survive from.
Ian, this is such a subculture, it's such a netherworld, and I sort of hesitate to even ask questions about it, really, because I'm aware that a lot of my assumptions are not based on the reality of actually working with this particular sector. But I was struck by what you said about the ideology, because, so much, presumably, about being a prison guard is about negotiation, actually. You can't keep people under lock and key 24 hours a day. They've got to have limited freedoms. If you're dealing with somebody who's maybe in for a life sentence, they've got nothing to lose, up to a point. But if somebody's ideologically driven, if they're nihilistic in their thinking, if they think their reward is in a better place, they're driven by a totally different set of values, aren't they? And that makes them much harder to control.
Yes, that's right. And we haven't been successful to date in managing to control that risk. If we had been, we wouldn't have had the catastrophic security failures, for example, that led to the murder of 2 students in Fishmongers Hall. So, yes, it is exceptionally difficult. And incidentally, I think you're asking questions on behalf of the public who are paying a huge amount of money to keep these people secured and away from harm. So it's very legitimate to be asking these questions. But it is right to say that, the prison service is dealing with some of the most sophisticated offenders that exist in conditions of extreme custody, who are unpredictable. Many of them, incidentally, are thwarted terrorists. In other words, the police and security service have scooped them up prior to committing an atrocity. So they are motivated, potentially as well, by a sense of unfilled mission. So those people are particularly dangerous. And again, the vulnerable targets all around them are prison officers.
Ian Acheson, we'll talk about this again, I'm sure, but for now, thanks very much indeed. Just briefly, the thoughts of Lynn May, who's alongside me today. And Lynn, my thought's this, you'll have a different one maybe, that we send people to prison not to find themselves in a finishing school for worse crimes, not to go there, ideologically unfinished, and actually find that you're in one big sort of madrasa.
I think this can be said for not just extremism, but all sorts of crimes. I used to work with young offenders and offenders, and they would say, if you want me to improve on my skill set in crime, send me to prison. They would blatantly say that. So I think in terms of this issue here, I don't know how it is in the prisons, but can they not be broken up, or ones that are going to serve indefinitely, where they're going to remain in prison? Can you not put them together because you know they're not going to be released anytime soon? I think for people that are going to be released soon, they shouldn't be placed with these sorts of individuals because they are going to fall victim to radicalism.
Well, the argument is, do you put all your eggs in one rotten basket and then just sort of seal it off from... But what are they going to do to each other? I mean, that's going to be sort of hyper-radicalised, isn't it? It's a tricky job, but as Ian Acheson made very clear there, they're doing a job on all our behalves, and we ought to be grateful for those willing and prepared to do it.